In the grim darkness of the far future, there is no peace, only the slow unraveling of sanity and the whispers that feast on weakness. They tell you corruption is a choice, that chaos comes to the willing, that you must seek it out. They lied. It comes in the moments you are weakest, when your lungs choke on ash, when the blood of comrades paints your hands, when your faith falters. That is when the gods notice you. I thought I was loyal. I thought I would die screaming the Emperor's name. Instead, I learned the truth. No one chooses to fall to chaos. It is chaos that chooses you, and once it whispers, you will never be alone again. But tell me, when the voice calls your name in the smoke, will you run or will you answer? The sky burned red above the trenches of Venar 9. Artillery shells screamed like banshees, tearing men apart in sprays of dirt and bone. We had fought for 3 weeks without food, without water, living on recycled rations and the bitter taste of our own fear. The commissar said the Emperor protected us, but the Emperor had not been in that trench. Only death was. When the enemy charge came, it was not men who attacked us, but beasts, mutated, savage, frothing with rage. They came howling across no man's land, a tide of muscle and iron. We opened fire until our laser guns melted, but it did not stop them. Bayonets clashed against rusted cleavers. My squad screamed, begged, died around me, and then the world slowed. The roar of the battlefield dulled, as if the sound itself was held at bay. A new voice slipped between the thunder, low, hungry, laughing. "You don't want to die here, do you?" I froze, blade locked with an enemy whose teeth gnashed inches from my face. The voice wasn't his. It was inside me, behind my eyes. "You are weak now, but I can make you strong. Spill their blood. Drown yourself in it. Only then will you live." My laser gun jammed. The creature's cleaver rose. For the first time in years I prayed, not to the Emperor but to the voice. I drove my bayonet upward, tearing through flesh. The blood sprayed hot across my face, and the voice laughed louder. The more I killed, the stronger I felt. Each thrust, each scream, filled me with an energy that was not my own. I was no longer fighting for survival. I was fighting because it felt good. When the last enemy fell, my squad was gone. My hands shook, soaked crimson, and the whisper coiled around my mind like a lover's breath. "Good. You are mine now, and there will be more." The battlefield fell silent, but somewhere beyond the smoke something massive stirred, something that had noticed me. The battlefield was a graveyard when dawn came. Corpses lay sprawled across the trenches like broken dolls, steam rising from the ruptured mud where blood had soaked deep. Flies gathered in clouds so thick they looked like smoke. I was the only one left breathing. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt watched. Every ruined wall, every shattered sandbag seemed to lean inward, studying me. The silence pressed heavy, broken only by the buzzing of flies and the faint hiss of still-burning promethium. And then, the visions began. At first it was only flickers, a lass bolt striking me in the head, a blade tearing my chest open, a world where I had not survived the night. Each glimpse was so real I staggered, clutching my skull, certain I was bleeding. But the wounds vanished between blinks. Then came more impossible paths. Visions where I walked away from the trench into a shining palace of crystal and fire. Visions where my hands glowed with light that could melt stone. Visions where my eyes were not my own, where 1,000 unseen things stared through them. I screamed, but the visions only laughed back. In the ruins beside me, a shape pulsed faintly. Carved into stone, scorched black by artillery, was a symbol that refused to stay still. It bent and shifted when I looked at it, curling like smoke, fractal and infinite. I could not comprehend its geometry, yet I understood it instantly, the mark of Tzinch. The air grew colder. The flies fell silent, and a whisper slid into my skull, smooth as oil. "You think survival was luck? No, child. You were chosen. Each path I show you is real, each outcome possible, but only I will lead you to the future that matters." I tried to close my eyes, to banish the shifting rune, but it burned inside my eyelids, reshaping itself with every heartbeat. And with it came knowledge, half-formed words, equations, truths no man should know. I felt my sanity fraying, my identity peeling away, replaced with something vast and alien. The voice spoke again, colder this time, commanding, "There are no accidents. There is only the design, and you are part of it." I fell to my knees, trembling, bile rising in my throat. For a moment I wanted nothing more than to claw the rune from the stone, to shatter it, to end the visions. But my hand would not move. Instead, my fingers reached out of their own accord, drawn to the symbol, compelled by a will that was not mine. The instant my skin brushed the stone, the world split open. Fire, ash, screams. 1,000 possible lives shredded past me in a storm of futures I could not control. In one I was burned alive by flamers. In another, crowned by writhing serpents. In another, a god's hand reached down and crushed me into dust. I tore my hand away, gasping, but the mark remained burned into my palm, seared black into the flesh. The whisper laughed softly. Now there is no turning back, and in that laughter I knew something had claimed me. I wasn't alone after all. 2 others had survived the slaughter, crawling from the wreckage of the trench like rats fleeing fire. One of them was Corporal Henrik, a man I had known for years. He was coughing, every breath wet and ragged. His flesh was blistered, his veins black beneath the skin. The wound in his side had festered overnight, maggots writhing beneath the bandages. He would not last the day. We tried to clean him with the meager supplies we scavenged, but it was hopeless. The stink of infection clung to him like smoke, and the rot spread deeper with every hour. He begged for water, for morphia, for death. But then the voice came back. Not the sharp hunger of the battlefield, not the weaving visions of futures. This time it was something else, something slow, patient, almost tender. Why let him suffer? Why let him die choking on his own rot when I can give him life? All it will cost is a taste of yours. Henrik's hand clawed at mine, his eyes wide with terror. He whispered prayers to the Emperor through cracked lips, but the Emperor was silent as he had always been. Only the whisper of the warp answered. I told myself I was only doing it for mercy, that this was not betrayal, not corruption, only kindness. The voice instructed me. I slit my palm with a jagged shard of shrapnel, letting my blood drip into the open wound of his side. The filth soaked it up, sizzling where flesh met blood. The stink grew worse, a sweet, cloying odor like rotted fruit. And then Henrik screamed, his body arched, eyes bulging as black veins spread like roots across his skin. The rot did not consume him, it sustained him. His wound sealed, not with flesh but with weeping sores that crawled as if alive. His breathing steadied. The maggots vanished into his veins. He lived, but when he looked at me, it wasn't Henrik anymore. His eyes were glazed, lips blistered, a smile too wide for his face stretching across his rotting jaw. He whispered thanks, but his voice was not his own. "Mercy," the voice crooned. "Mercy is my gift. You see now, don't you? Decay is not death. Decay is life eternal." I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. But Henrik stood tall, stronger than he had been before. He gripped my arm with unnatural strength, his touch clammy and wet. And when he smiled, his teeth dripped black. For a heartbeat, I believed the lie. I believed I had saved him. But deep inside, I knew the truth. This was no healing. This was corruption. And the more I stared at his rotting grin, the more I realized it would not stop here. Sleep never came. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt it. Something moving beneath my skin. Not rot like Henrik's. Not the shifting visions that had burned my mind before. This was different. It was heat. It was hunger. When dawn broke over the shattered trenches, I realized something had changed in me. The air itself was sharper, clearer. I could hear the buzzing of flies from hundreds of meters away, the distant grind of tanks, the ragged heartbeat of Henrik's rotting chest. Even the stink of decay smelled rich, layered, almost intoxicating. And my voice. When I spoke, it came smoother, deeper, words slipping like silk between my teeth. Henrik stared at me as if entranced, muttering blessings under his breath. The mark was not visible on my flesh, but I could feel it pulsing beneath the skin. A secret brand carved not with fire, but with desire. That night the enemy came again. Not beasts this time, but soldiers, armored and disciplined. We should have died. But as I raised my blade, something inside me surged. Every strike, every scream, every spray of blood felt exquisite. The clash of metal on bone rang like a symphony. The warmth of blood on my hands sent shivers of pleasure crawling up my spine. I laughed as I killed them. I laughed, and I could not stop. The more I fought, the more I wanted. Each life ended was not survival. It was ecstasy. When the battle ended, I stood panting, my body trembling, my lips stretched into a smile I did not command. Henrik stared at me, his rotting grin faltering. The third survivor, a boy barely old enough to hold a laser gun, looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. He had seen. He knew. That night, while Henrik slept, I crept over to the boy. He whispered prayers, begged me not to, but my hand closed around his throat. His fear was intoxicating. His last breath burned like wine against my lips. When he went still, I realized I was smiling again. And I did not stop. I buried his body in the ash, but it did not matter. The act was written on my skin, on my soul. The mark was mine now, and I had never felt more alive. Morning came with the bark of orders. A commissar had arrived at the forward line, trailed by a thin-boned priest clutching a cracked aquila. Their boots crushed ash and bone as they stalked the trenches, eyes sharp, searching. When they reached me, they stopped. The commissar's gaze was hard, unblinking. His hand rested on his bolt pistol. The priest clutched his relic tighter, lips whispering a litany that made my skin crawl. "You," the commissar said flatly. "Step forward." I obeyed, though every nerve screamed. I could feel Henrik's rotting breath at my back, hear the faint, wet rasp of his lungs. The commissar's nose twitched. His eyes narrowed. "You smell wrong," he muttered. "Rot and incense." The priest raised his relic. His voice rose to a shout. "This one is touched. Do you not feel it? The taint coils around him like smoke." The commissar's hand shifted toward his pistol. Henrik stiffened beside me, maggot flesh twitching, and the voice whispered, "If you want to live, spill their blood. Betray, become." Time slowed again. I saw every possibility. If I hesitated, the commissar would fire. If I denied, the priest would scream until the whole trench knew. There was only one path forward. I moved. The bayonet thrust upward into the priest's throat. His hymn cut off in a choking gurgle as blood sprayed hot across my face. Korn laughed in my ear. The commissar's pistol cleared its holster, but I was faster. I twisted, knocking it wide, driving my blade into his chest. His eyes widened in shock as I leaned close, whispering the words the voice had fed me. A prayer not to the Emperor, but to the thing that had chosen me. Tzinch purred approval. Henrik was grinning, coughing wet laughter as the commissar crumpled. The smell of his blood mingled with the commissar's, sweet and foul. Nurgle hummed with contentment. I stood panting over their corpses, blood dripping from my hands, and I realized I was smiling again. Not from victory, not from survival, from the thrill, the power, the taste of defiance itself. Slanesh shivered through me like silk. For the first time, I did not deny it. For the first time, I whispered back to the voices in the dark. Yes. The trench was silent, save for Henrik's ragged breathing. And somewhere deep in the warp, I felt 4 gazes fix upon me. I had betrayed the Imperium. I had surrendered to chaos, and I knew there was no turning back. Sleep was no longer mine. When I closed my eyes, the world behind my eyelids did not fade to darkness. It erupted. Flames licked the sky, blue and violet, fire that burned but did not consume. Cities of crystal rose and collapsed in the same heartbeat. Every star bent inward, reshaping itself into an endless spiral of eyes, watching, blinking, seeing futures I could not comprehend. And through it all, a single voice whispered, "The blood was your beginning. The rot was your mercy. The pleasure was your awakening, but I am your destiny." I tried to scream myself awake, but I was already awake within the dream. My body lay shivering in the trench, Henrik asleep beside me, but my mind, my soul, was being pulled somewhere else. I stood in a chamber that stretched into infinity. Every wall was lined with books, scrolls, tomes written in languages that slithered across the page. And above it all, a figure loomed, a bird-headed giant cloaked in shifting robes, wings unfurling and curling with every blink. Its eyes never stopped moving, thousands of them, each set within feathers that shimmered like oil on water. The changer of ways. Tzeentch. It did not speak with words. It spoke with possibilities. My own voice echoed back at me, warped and doubled. You wonder if this is corruption, if you have lost yourself. But there was never a self to lose. There is only the path, my path. You are clay, and I am the hand that shapes you. Visions spilled from its wings like smoke. I saw myself crowned in fire, armies bowing at my feet. I saw myself torn apart by demons screaming into eternity. I saw myself killing Henrik. I saw myself saving him. I saw myself as a god. I saw myself as nothing. Each future flashed and vanished, but the weight of them pressed into my skull until I thought it would crack. I collapsed, clutching my head, blood running from my nose and ears. The bird-headed figure bent low, its beak nearly touching my face. Its many eyes burned into mine. Do not fear the futures. Fear only the one where you resist me. That is the only path that ends in nothing. When I awoke, dawn had broken. Henrik stared at me, muttering that I had been whispering in my sleep, my eyes glowing faintly in the dark. I turned my hands over and saw the truth. Etched into my palms, faint but pulsing, was the spiral I had touched days before. The rune of Tzeentch, carved now into my flesh, and in the distance, beyond the ruined line of trenches, I swore I saw wings unfurl against the horizon. The first sore appeared by midday. At first I thought it was a wound from the night before, a scrape hidden beneath the grime. But it grew. By the hour it spread across my forearm, swelling into a blister that throbbed with every heartbeat. Then came another, and another. By nightfall my body was crawling with them. Boils and welts bubbled beneath my skin, splitting open with wet sighs to release pus that steamed in the cold air. My flesh should have burned, my nerves should have screamed. But there was no pain. Only a strange, numbing warmth that spread through every joint, every tendon. My body felt heavier but stronger. Each movement oozed with power. Henrik stared at me with wonder. His rotting flesh quivered as if recognizing a kinship. You're blessed, he croaked, his voice wet. The grandfather smiles on you, the grandfather. The name fell from his lips like prayer. I stumbled to the trench wall, bile rising as a boil burst across my chest. But the sickness did not weaken me, it braced me. The more I rotted, the stronger I felt. My thoughts dulled, but the fear dulled too. Where once every shadow felt like a blade at my throat, now I felt calm, safe, as if the decay was not punishment, but protection. It wasn't long before the survivors noticed. A handful of loyal guardsmen, gaunt and hollow-eyed, found our trench. They saw Henrik half dead but still moving, and me, sores glistening across my body, their faces twisted in revulsion. One raised his lasgun, voice cracking. Emperor, save us, what are you? I should have begged them to understand. I should have explained. Instead I lunged. Their lasbolts seared through my flesh, but the wounds sealed with steaming pus as fast as they burned. Their blades cut deep, but every cut only opened another blister, spreading more foul warmth into my veins. I laughed as I crushed them. Their bones snapped like dry twigs in my hands. Their screams became a hymn, a chorus echoing across the trench. When it was over, I stood panting, my body dripping with blood and filth. Their corpses lay broken at my feet, eyes wide in horror, and Henrik's grin widened into something almost joyous. You see? He whispered. You see how mercy feels? He will never abandon you now. I looked at my hands, bloated, cracked, weeping fluids that sizzled against the dirt. Hands no longer mine, and yet, they felt right. The rot was not killing me. It was remaking me. That night the air trembled with drums. Through the smoke, I saw fires burning bright, and men chanting in the dark, their blades dripping fresh blood. The cult had found me. The night shook with drums. At first I thought it was artillery, but the rhythm was too precise. A heartbeat carved into the air, each thunderous beat rattling through my bones. I followed the sound through the shattered ruins, Henrik limping beside me, his rotting frame wheezing with every step. The flames appeared first. Towers of fire rising from braziers made of broken helmets and shattered skulls. The stench of burning blood filled the sky, and then I saw them. A circle of men. No, not men. Not anymore. Their flesh was scarred with jagged runes, their armor daubed in crimson handprints. They stood around a pit dug deep into the earth, chanting with voices raw from screaming. Prisoners knelt at the edge, bound in chains. Some were guardsmen like me, some were civilians dragged from the ruins. All of them begged, wept, cursed. The cultists ignored their pleas. They raised their blades as one, and with a roar that drowned out even the drums, they began. Throats opened. Blood poured. The pit drank it all. The earth itself seemed to tremble with hunger. Henrik dropped to his knees, hands raised toward the fire. Glory to the blood god, he rasped, spittle and pus dribbling down his chin. One of the cultists turned toward me. His eyes burned like coals beneath a rusted helm. He held out a blade slick with gore. Prove yourself. The prisoner shoved toward me was a boy, barely 16, uniform hanging loose on a body thinned by hunger. His eyes met mine, wide, pleading. He whispered the Emperor's name, and then the drums grew louder in my skull. The voice thundered over his prayers. Spill him, spill all of them. Every drop belongs to me. My hand trembled as I took the blade. The boy's lips moved, begging silently. For a moment I hesitated, but then the pit pulsed, a geyser of blood mist rising to kiss my face. It smelled sweet. It smelled holy. I drove the blade into his throat. The boy's scream cut short in a wet gurgle. Hot blood sprayed across my face, my chest, my hands, and I laughed. Not with joy, not with victory, but with something far darker, far purer. The cult roared there. Approval chanting louder, faster, blades rising and falling in rhythm. The drums matched my heartbeat. The frenzy consumed me. I killed again and again. Each life ended in fire and crimson rain. Each scream became part of a song that filled the night sky. By the time it ended, the pit was full. The earth itself shuddered, as if drunk on the feast. The fire roared higher, painting the stars red. I stood above it all, chest heaving, dripping with blood that was not mine. And in the silence that followed, I knew. I had not just killed, I had worshipped, and Khorne had heard me. When the blood haze faded, I felt it, a rush beneath my skin, a shiver of pleasure in every nerve. The blood god had taken his due, but another waited to claim the thrill that followed. When the drums finally silenced, the night did not. The frenzy lingered in my veins like fire. My skin tingled where the blood had dried, each drop a caress, each scar a hymn. I should have been exhausted, broken. Instead, I felt alive, faster, stronger, sharper. The world had shifted. Every flicker of fire danced like a lover's hand across my skin. Every breath of smoke tasted sweet, thick, indulgent. Even the cries of the dying echoed like music in my ears. I could not stop smiling. The cult dragged fresh prisoners forward, but I barely noticed. My hands twitched, desperate for another blade, another scream, another taste. Khorne had taken his due, but something else, someone else, stirred within the frenzy. A voice, softer than silk, slid through my skull. Yes, this is what you were meant for. Not duty, not survival, but joy. And oh, how exquisite joy can be. The next raid came before dawn. The cult swept through the ruins, blades wet, laughter shrill. I followed, heart pounding with a hunger I could not name. We found a squad of guardsmen, ragged survivors clinging to their faith. They fired at us, shouting prayers to the Emperor. The las bolts seared past me, but I did not flinch. I danced between them. Every movement flowed like water, faster than thought, faster than fear. The air itself bent for me, carrying me through the storm of fire. I heard my own laughter ringing clear, bright, perfect. When I reached them, my blade was already red. Each cut was ecstasy. Each scream a symphony. I drank their terror, their agony, their last breaths like wine. Their deaths were not kills, they were consummations, and when the last one fell gurgling on his own blood, I trembled with release. But the hunger did not fade. It grew. The next skirmish I struck too soon. The next I struck too wildly. I cut down not just the enemy, but one of the cultists at my side, his head rolling free in a spray of crimson. For a moment, silence fell. The cult stared at me, eyes wide. Then, slowly, they began to laugh. One dropped to his knees, chanting praises. Another smeared my face with blood, hissing, "Chosen," but I barely heard them. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heart, demanding more. Friend, foe. It did not matter. All that mattered was the blade, the blood, the bliss. And in the echo of my laughter, I realized I was no longer killing to live. I was living to kill. The cult's laughter turned to silence when new orders came. Not slaughter for its own sake, but a mission. To burn what remained of the Imperium's defenses. A choice awaited me, and this time there would be no going back. The orders came at dusk. The cult gathered in the ruins, torches sputtering in the wind, flames casting long, jagged shadows across the broken stone. The warlord who led them, a giant and crude, spiked armor, spoke only one word: burn. The Imperium still clung to a last bastion nearby, a makeshift redoubt, half-ruined but stubborn, where a handful of guardsmen fought to the last. My guardsmen, men who had once bled beside me, who had trusted me. Henrik grinned his rotting grin. They will call for help, he wheezed. They will cry for their emperor. He coughed, spitting black ichor. But you will answer instead. The cult roared approval, chanting the names of the gods. Gorn's hunger for slaughter, Tzeentch's design in betrayal, Nurgle's embrace of despair, Slanesh's thrill in desecration, all of it boiled in my skull. And in the center of it, my choice. For a heartbeat, I saw another future. I saw myself crawling back to the bastion, swearing loyalty to the Emperor, begging forgiveness. Perhaps dying on my knees, but dying faithful. It was possible. I could still turn back, but then the visions twisted. I saw the Commissar's face as I'd driven the blade into his chest. I saw the priest's blood on my hands. I saw the boy's last breath as my knife slid across his throat. There was no turning back. When the cult surged forward, I surged with them. The bastion was already failing, laser-gun fire flashing through the smoke. Voices shouted prayers to the Emperor, but their faith was brittle, their line breaking. They recognized me when I stepped into the firelight. "Joral," one of them gasped, disbelief cracking his voice. "You're alive. Praise the I cut him down before he finished. His blood sprayed across the barricade, and the cult howled in ecstasy. I tore through them, comrades, brothers, the last tether to what I had once been. Each face I knew only made the blade fall harder. Some begged, some cursed me, some simply wept, but none survived. When the bastion finally burned, I stood alone amid the flames, the corpses of the last loyalists strewn at my feet. And as the fire roared, I felt it, searing into my flesh, carving itself across my soul. A mark. Not the rune of Tzeentch alone. Not the swords of Nurgle, nor the frenzy of Khorne, nor the ecstasy of Slanesh. All of them. All at once, the symbol writhed across my skin, glowing, shifting, impossible to fix in place. Every god's touch burned within me, a single sigil of chaos undivided. I was theirs. All of theirs, completely. And as the last cries of my dying comrades faded into ash, I laughed. But the laughter did not last. That night my body began to twist anew. Bones cracked, flesh swelled. And what crawled from my skin was not human anymore. The night after the bastion burned, my body broke. It began with my skin. The pallor deepened until the flesh beneath looked waxen, corpse-white. Veins bulged dark, crawling across my arms like black rivers. Boils burst and healed in the same breath, spewing filth that hardened into scabs of bone. Then came the bones themselves. They twisted inside me, cracking loud enough for Henrik to flinch. Spikes split through muscle. Horns erupted from my skull, curling upward, dripping with blood that hardened into obsidian ridges. Each tear of flesh should have been agony, but it was not. It was ecstasy. I staggered into the firelight, body contorting, spine bending into something monstrous. Henrik watched with reverence, pus dribbling from his lips as he whispered, "Chosen. Chosen of the grandfather. Chosen of the changer." My vision blurred, then sharpened. Colors split apart, then reformed, brighter than any palette man was meant to see. When I looked at the cult around me, I saw more than men. I saw the threads of their fates twisting in the air. I saw where their paths ended. I saw where mine began. The eyes were the last. When they opened, the world reeled. Not the eyes of a man, but eyes of warp light, burning amber and violet, glowing through the dark like lanterns. The villagers from the ruins came crawling when they saw. Thin, starving things, faces blackened with soot, hands trembling. They had seen us burn their defenders. Now they saw me, and they fell to their knees. They wept and prayed, not to the Emperor, but to me. Their words slurred into chants, tongues wrapping around names they should not have known. God, prophet, blessed. Their worship washed over me like heat. And I knew then I was no longer man Joral. The name echoed faintly like a whisper from a dream. Joral the ganger, Joral the guardsman, Joral the survivor. But the sound of it was hollow, meaningless. When I tried to cling to it, it slid away, lost in the tide of voices. Not Joral, never again. The man was gone. What stood in the firelight was something else, and the gods demanded proof. The next night, the cult led me into war. Not against ruins, not against the weak, but into open battle. And in that slaughter I would learn what it meant to kill not as a man, but as a monster. The loyalists struck at dawn. Their banners rose above the smoke, tattered but defiant, vox amplified prayers to the Emperor echoing across the ruins. They came in formation, disciplined, rifles braced, their commissar bellowing scripture as if words could turn back death. The cult around me howled like animals, blades scraping against armor, voices cracked from endless chanting. But it was not their frenzy that broke the line. It was mine. I surged forward before the first volley fell, horns glinting, eyes burning, blade raised. The lasbolt slammed into me, searing flesh, cauterizing wounds. I barely felt them. Each hit was not pain, but fuel. When I reached their ranks, I exploded, my blade carved arcs of red through the morning light. One soldier's head flew, spinning like a coin. Another's gut spilled across the mud, steaming in the chill air. A third eye split from shoulder to hip, the spray painting my face in crimson, and I laughed. Gods help me, I laughed. Behind me the cult surged, emboldened by the spectacle. They screamed Khorne's name as they tore into the loyalists, but their voices were drowned by mine. Every kill fed the fire in my veins, every scream sharpened the edge of my joy. At first I thought I still fought with purpose, to break the line, to scatter them. But soon purpose dissolved. I chased not victory, not survival, but the act itself. Killing was the purpose. Killing was the prayer. Killing was the reward. I ripped a bayonet from one soldier's grip and rammed it through his throat, savoring the wet crack of cartilage. I stomped another's skull beneath my boot, bone collapsing with a sound more satisfying than any hymn. The commissar swung his power sword at me, face twisted in fury. I caught his wrist, twisted until the bone snapped, and drove my blade through his chest. As his blood bubbled from his lips, he tried to shout the Emperor's name one last time. I silenced it with a twist. By the time the sun rose fully over the battlefield, there was no formation, no order, only heaps of butchered flesh and the steam of blood in the cold air. The cult knelt around me, drenched in gore, chanting, trembling, worshipping, but I barely heard them. I was lost in the memory of the kill. Not the victory, not the battle, the kill itself. I realized then that I no longer killed because I must. I killed because I could, and because every kill tasted like joy. The man was gone. The soldier was gone. What remained was the weapon, and the weapon hungered. But when the frenzy faded, whispers slithered back into my mind, visions, futures twisting. The blood god had his due, but the changer of ways had plans still unfolding. The battlefield stank of iron and smoke. I walked among the corpses, cultists trailing behind me in reverent silence, each step squelched in blood and offal. The frenzy was gone, leaving only a sharp clarity, an awareness of every sound, every color, every flicker of heat. My senses blazed, gifts sharpened to agony. It was then I saw it, half buried in the mud, blackened by fire, something fragile. I reached down with a clawed hand and lifted it free, a photograph. Warp burned at the edges, smeared with ash, but still clear enough to see. A woman's face, gaunt yet smiling. A boy in her arms, a scrap of a home behind them, walls of rusted metal and smoke-stained cloth. I knew the faces. I knew them before the gods had touched me, before the name Joral had been torn from my tongue. Mother. Brother. Memories surged, jagged and wrong. Nights huddled in the underhive, warmth found in scraps of blanket. Her laugh thin, weary but real. The boy's wide eyes looking to me for protection. Faces from a life burned away in smoke and decay. For one heartbeat I felt it. Not joy, not frenzy, not the sweet agony of battle, but sorrow, and then the voice slid through the sorrow like silk through flesh. Do you feel that? Do you remember? Pathetic, fragile, human. These scraps keep you chained. They must break. Break them, and you will never doubt again. The cult had gathered close, watching. Some knelt, some smiled with cracked lips, some wept as if witnessing a sacred rite. In my hand, the photograph trembled. My claws tore the edges without meaning to. Part of me wanted to cradle it, to bury it deep, to preserve that last flicker of who I had been, but the voice was relentless. Prove yourself. Kill what still binds you. Destroy it. Destroy yourself. The urge coiled tight, a hunger almost as sharp as battle lust. I raised the photograph to my chest, and with one brutal motion crushed it in my fist. The glass shattered. The paper tore. The faces dissolved into bloodied pulp. The silence that followed was immense. I looked at the ruin in my hand, felt the shards grind into my flesh, and felt nothing. The sorrow was gone. The memory was gone. Only the void remained, and the void was filled with the gods. The cult shrieked in ecstasy, some clawing at their own flesh in worship, some collapsing in seizures of joy. Henrik pressed his forehead into the mud, crying out, "Chosen! Chosen of all powers!" And within me something broke. No, something was freed. The last tie to mortal life was severed. The man who had once been Joral was ashes now. The weapon, the servant, the chosen, only he remained. I raised my blood-stained claws, and the cult roared as one. But in the stillness of night, the visions returned. Whispers of futures yet unwritten. A glimpse of warbands gathering, of destinies converging. The changer of ways had more to show me. And the path twisted further than I could yet comprehend. The storm came without warning. One moment, the sky above the ruins was ash-gray, heavy with smoke. The next, it tore apart in colors no mortal eye was meant to see. Warp lightning split the clouds, not in jagged streaks, but in twisting, writhing sigils that burned themselves into the air. The cult collapsed in worship, clawing their own faces bloody as the storm swallowed the horizon. And in the center of it all, I stood alone. The gods had come for me. The ground cracked open, molten veins spilling light. Shapes crawled from the fissures, armored giants, beast-headed abominations, champions of chaos marked in scars and sorcery. Their voices rose as one, a single word, echoing across the storm. Prove. They charged. The first wore the brass sigil of Khorne carved into his chest, his chain axe howling as he swung. I met him with blade and claw, every strike ringing like thunder. Blood spattered across the stones, each drop igniting in fire. I felt the blood god's laughter booming in my skull as I drove my claw into his throat and tore his head free. Another came, bloated with disease, flies swarming his rotting bulk. Nurgle's stench rolled from him, choking, suffocating. He split my side with a rusted cleaver, pus and bile searing the wound, but my flesh closed before the blade left me. I laughed through the rot, feeling strength bloom where the infection spread. I crushed his chest in my grip, the burst of filth drenching me like anointment. Then came the sorcerer. Robes aflame with shifting runes, staff blazing with impossible light. He called visions down upon me, futures in which I lay broken, crushed, erased. For a heartbeat I staggered, until I remembered whose path I walked. I spat his prophecy back at him in a scream, seized his staff and shattered it across his skull. Tzeentch's whispers coiled around me, pleased. Last was the beautiful one, skin like polished glass, eyes like stars. Her blade sang as it cut, every wound a symphony, every strike a kiss. I faltered, each caress of pain threading into pleasure until my knees threatened to buckle. But I embraced it, sank into it, let the ecstasy consume me. And in that surrender I found victory. I slit her throat, and her blood sprayed across me like perfume. Slaanesh sighed in delight. The storm roared louder, winds tearing flesh from bone. I staggered, broken, burned, torn open, and yet unyielding. Then the gods spoke, not in words but in fire and shadow, in rot and song, in whispers that tore reality open. Their power poured into me, my flesh twisted, horns lengthening, wings of bone tearing from my shoulders, eyes blazing brighter than the storm itself. My chest split open, ribs curling outward like a shrine to the heart that beat within. Two hearts now, thrumming with unholy rhythm. My skin glowed with runes that would not stay still, ever shifting, ever burning. I screamed, but it was not agony. It was ascension. When the storm finally broke, the battlefield lay in silence. The champions were gone, reduced to ash. The cult rose to their feet, weeping and shrieking in worship. And I was no longer a man, no longer a soldier, not even a monster. I was something else, something theirs. As the storm faded, a voice deeper than eternity whispered through the ruins. The man is gone. The weapon is forged. Take your name and serve. And with it came the promise that my first true war as a servant of chaos was about to begin. When the warp storm finally guttered out, the world did not return. It bent. Smoke drifted upward in slow spirals that refused to fade, as if the sky were savoring the scent of ruin. The cult rose, shivering and weeping, and knelt around me in a ring of torn throats and shining eyes. Their mouths moved in prayers with no single name, syllables for 4 thrones spoken as one. I lowered my gaze to my own hands. Not hands, talons of bone and lacquered filth, slick with a sheen that was not dawn and not blood, but something that remembered both. The shifting sigil blazed across my chest, horned, feathered, ulcered, and beautiful, never the same shape twice, never truly still. Each beat of my twin hearts pressed it deeper into me, a tide that would never recede. A vox crackle reached the ruins, a loyalist patrol picking through the outskirts, murmuring code phrases, asking what had happened to their bastion, their brothers, their world. I tasted their fear from leagues away, like ash on the tongue. Master, Henrik rasped at my feet, sour breath sweet to me now. Command, and we will die for you. I understood then I would not need to command. I was commanded through. Strings hummed in the dark behind my skull. Futures brushed my shoulders like cloaks. One path opened wider than the rest, and I stepped onto it without thought, as a blade steps into a throat. I moved. The patrol found me where the road narrowed between collapsed habs. They saw a silhouette at first, then the horns, the ruin of wings clawing from my back, the eyes that carried their reflections like lanterns sinking in a well. They cried the Emperor's name the way drowning men cry air. I answered with fire that was not flame. Sound buckled. Stone ran like wax. Bodies folded into themselves in perfect, impossible geometry, as if a careful hand were tidying a mess. Those who did not die quickly died singing. They could not have helped it. My passing peeled hymns from their lungs the way a knife peels rind. A thought and rot blossomed where their boots touched soil. A breath and rapture laced the pain until blades fell from nerveless fingers. A gesture, and their last courage curdled into rage so that they struck each other to pieces to reach me faster. Khorne fed first. Nurgle smiled next. Slaanesh sighed long. Tzeentch only watched and turned a page. When it ended, I stood among armfuls of uniform and bone. The cult gathered, hushed, like children creeping close to a bonfire. Behind them, the villagers pressed foreheads to rubble, whispering titles for me in voices that could not agree. Seraph, Plague Saint, Haruspex, Oracle. None were wrong. None were true enough. A shadow rippled across the road, a gunship without serial or prayer, skinned in flayed banners, descending on whispering thrusters. From its maw disembarked giants in ancient plate, red and black and wrought green and mirror pale. Sigils nailed into their pauldrons like verdicts. Not loyal, never loyal. The largest regarded me through lenses the color of old wounds. Weapon, he said, and the word fit. You will come. I did not kneel. I did not answer. The answer had been made on a night of drums and a dawn of slaughter. The answer had been the commissar's chest, the priest's severed hymn, the boy's last breath in my palm. The answer had been the storm. Name? A lesser giant asked, voice metallic through his grill. A pause, like the space between the last beat of a heart and the fall of a blade. Names are for men. I serve, I said. It was enough. They made a place for me among them. No oath, no brand, no iron chained to my neck. The chains were already in me, forged from desire, fear, hunger, and design. I felt the vastness waiting, void dark holds that stank of oil and incense, armor shrines humming with caged machine souls, temples grown from bone and music and mold. Somewhere beyond, a war was gathering. No raid, no riot. A work, a design with teeth. On the embarkation ramp, I looked once into a shard of shattered plasteel and saw what the world would see. A thing with wings too small for the ruin of its back. A crown of antlers and horns, a lamp of eyes that did not blink. The reflection smiled before I thought to, was there a cost? Memory offered a woman with tired hands and a laugh like thin light through smoke. It offered a boy reaching for me with trust I had not deserved. It offered a name spoken once more, a syllable that stung like winter air. The sigil over my heart burned brighter, and the shard melted in my grip on the gunship. They gave me a blade that hummed without sound, and a place at the prow. Cities became veins beneath us, rivers charcoal-threaded wounds. I felt the gods observing, 4 thrones in agreement for a moment so brief it could be cut into and worn as a jewel. We pierced the cloud deck. The world dwindled. Stars opened like wounds that had never healed. Was it a gift? Of course. The kind that cannot be returned. The kind that keeps on giving long after there is no one left to receive. Below, fires found each other and became a line. Ahead, the void waited like an altar. Behind, ash climbed into the shape of a man and blew away. The Vox clicked once in the cabin. Coordinates, targets, names that would not be names for long. Henrik knelt beside my talons and wept into the deck. Not for fear, not for joy. For rightness. I set the blade across my knees. It thrummed. My heart's answered. Far away, something laughed without mirth and meant it. The boy is dead. The man is forgotten. Only the vessel remains. In the quiet hours between stars, I have learned what silence truly is. It is not the absence of sound. It is the waiting. The sharp intake before a scream. The pause between heartbeats. The stillness before a galaxy burns. I am that silence now. Once I thought myself a man. A ganger, a soldier. A servant of a throne that never knew my name. That boy died screaming in the underhive. That soldier burned with the bastion. That servant was carved away piece by piece until only the vessel remained. The gods whisper through me now. Every step I take is 4 steps at once. Blood in Khorne's ledger, decay in Nurgle's garden, threads in Tzeentch's design, ecstasy in Slaanesh's sigh. They do not fight for me. They fight through me. Worlds will learn my name not as salvation, but as the taste of iron in their throats. Legions will march, not for loyalty, not for glory, but because I am the proof that flesh can be unmade and remade into forever. I am the hymn of betrayal sung in every burning cathedral. I am the lesson that the Emperor was wrong, and when the void itself goes silent, when prayers curdle, when hope flees, when the sky tears open like a wound, you will remember this truth. There is no salvation. Only the weapon, only the warp. If this tale chilled your blood and left you wanting more whispers from the darkness of Warhammer 40K, then don't just walk away into the void. Subscribe to me channel, strike the bell of notifications and like this tale. Leave your thoughts below. What would you sacrifice for power? Join us and let the next descent into the grimdark consume you.